Hello and welcome back to Live Now with Veenu and Chuck. I'm your host, Veenu Keller, along with my amazing co-host, Chuck Hogan. We want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV's channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So tonight is the night that I got to pick our topic because this this topic that we're going to talk about tonight, it really, when I heard this quote a while ago, and to be honest, I don't know if my coach told me or if I said it when I was coaching, but it really says that don't base your fulfillment on other people's expectations.
Yes.
And when I heard that 2 weeks ago, I said, wow, I think that this is where most of us come up with that judgment, right? It's, what is our definition of success? What is your definition of being fulfilled, which you and I've talked about before on this show, about being fulfilled, feeling enough is when you're fulfilled, and why we always feel we're not enough. Because to be fulfilled means that we're fulfilling everybody else's expectations of them that they want in us. And then once we do, then and only then are we really fulfilled, which really has not worked out very well for me. I don't know about you.
Well, it's kind of like raindrops, right? Rain doesn't accumulate just in one spot or where you want it to. It kind of goes everywhere. We can say the same about expectations and happiness. We can also say the same about guilt and not feeling fulfilled, is that it's not a mutually exclusive proposition. The concept that someone else's opinion matters more than ours, and that's what we're going to base our entire existence off of, my dear friend, the answer is wrong answer. There's this kind of fundamental, I'll say, and I don't want to call it a flaw, I'll just say it's a scenario, it's an engagement that we're associated to as children. And part of it is that it's even how we learn how to play games. Because most of the time when you're little and you're learning about games, there's no judgment. It's just that you're having fun and you're engaging in the game. Somewhere along the line, there comes this person who's called a referee. And it can be a parent, it can be a loved one, it could be an affiliate, associate, a friend, even just an acquaintance, but it's someone, and they are given an authority to have a whistle and this striped uniform in some instances. And their position and privilege is to judge whether or not you've committed a foul, whether or not you are following the rules of the game. And now all of a sudden, we're functioning out of fear more than we are out of prosperity and opportunity.
Right.
Because we just don't want to make the person blow the whistle. We don't want to be that person. And it's like, oh, so someone else's expectation is that you're going to be a rule follower. Well, let's tell Elon Musk that and see how he feels about that. Or, Warren Buffett or some of these other people who have, from a counterpoint in life, have been mismatchers in some ways. They're rule followers, but they're also rule creators. And so what's the difference? To your point, is your happiness and prosperity predicated on someone else's opinion of you, their expectation of you, what they think you should have been or are or aren't?
Well, I think that our brains are formed this way because when we're born, we're a little creature that knows how to cry. That's it. That's every sign of communication is through crying, right? If I'm hungry, I cry. If I want you to pick me up, I cry. If I want you to change me, I cry. If I'm uncomfortable, I cry. If I have a headache, I cry. And this big person that we know is our parents, because we're so tiny at that time. These people are giant, like this big giant's coming to pick me up. And all of a sudden we learn that if we cry, they come. And then they try all these different things to make sure we get satisfied. And We also learn as we get older through toddler stage that when we do something that they like, they cheer us on.
Yes.
And when we do something they don't like, they scold us or they with what we think they withhold their love from us, and it was so funny because my daughter was saying something. She got, we were at Myrtle Beach and we were cleaning up, and I'm like, oh gosh, we have 3 ice creams in here, we got to get rid of them. And of course all the kids are like, I want one, I want one. And our daughter saying, she says, I just love you guys. And I'm like, you love us now because you get the ice cream in the morning? She says, well, even when I'm mad at you, I want you to know something, I still love you.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, what a beautiful thing that she is saying in this moment, because she obviously knows that's true with us too. Is
Yes.
that through her upbringing, when we're angry or we're disciplining or there's a hard no when she doesn't want it, she still knows that we love her because she's able to communicate this. But I'm just saying, we're raised that way, right? That we have to impress that person to get the applause, to get the congratulations. And as we grow up, we do the same thing in schools. How do you get the star by your name? How do you get the honor roll? How do you get noticed by your coach on the team?
It's the pain and pleasure principle that we talked about last week. It's this fundamental ideology that when there's praise, that you love me, and now I get love and connection. The number one thing that all human beings are looking for is connection.
Right.
Now, if we want to compound that and say, oh, okay, well, connection's enough. For many people, it is. If they feel connected, then they actually feel it's like, why do people go to nightclubs? Why do people socialize? Why do they go to, communal events? I say, if it's a self-help seminar, if it's church, it's people communing together for connection.
Because people will rather get connection than love. Because if they don't know true love or they don't know the feeling of true love, which is absolute connection, right?
Mhm.
Unconditional love is absolute connection. They will sacrifice that just to have that connection. And I know that all too well, my friend, from years ago.
Well, and so part of it is that and this goes to exactly the topic today. What is the expectation in each one of these environments? Because when we actually go to these spaces, we are actually signing on for whatever version of expectation it is. The expectation in church is very different than the expectation at a nightclub. The expectation is it very different at a nightclub than it is in your college course, or than it is within the scope of your family and your friends. So, how does this become so important? Well, the leverage is that we develop our own reality. And in the anticipation of failure, we will actually exercise and push to become almost the absurd at sometimes, Venu. It's like, oh my gosh, like really, that's what's running through your head. All this amazing stuff's happening, and that's where you're putting your attention. Wow, wow! I saw that going a very different way, and it's like, huh? So is it right or wrong?
You know, it's funny that you asked that. Is it right or wrong? We have a really good friend in common, Connie. What's her last name now?
Osterholt.
Osterholt. Yes, Connie Osterholt. And she gave me one of the greatest lessons of my life back in, I believe it was 2017, maybe 2017, 2016. No, 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 actually 2019. Sorry, 2019. Not as long as I thought it was, but it was a great lesson. She said to me that I had a conflict with another colleague.
Mhm.
And she says, well, what makes his perception wrong? And I'm like, because I know what he said is wrong about me because I'm the one who did the action. She's like, okay, I'm not saying that he's not wrong, but I'm also not saying you're wrong. And I'm like, huh? She says, everyone's perception is right because it's their perception.
That's right.
No one's perception is wrong in that moment. So it's not wrong or right. It's maybe wrong or right through your perception as it's wrong or right through his perception. But you're arguing against someone else's perception. Do you think you're going to win? And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. And I'm going to tell you that was probably, you always get these life lessons, and I've had many in my life, but there's certain ones that stick out in that moment. Like I can see Connie and I having that conversation, and it was so beautiful the way she led this conversation because it made so much sense. And I was thinking, my whole life, that's what I've been doing.
Sure.
I've been wronging or writing someone's perception of me, or wronging or writing someone's judgment of me, or someone's expectations of me, and thinking that's the only way I'm going to get to fulfillment. That's the only way I'm going to be enough,
Yes.
and that is why we've all heard that the two universal fears in life is, am I enough, and will I be loved?
Mm-hmm.
Well, exactly. Because one thing you just said is we're always going for connection. So we're not even knowing what the love is, right? We're always like, there's so much connection available. So we're constantly grasping to it. And the other thing is that we're never going to feel like we're enough, because in that moment, whose expectations are we trying to fulfill? So we know that we're fulfilled in that moment. So then we are enough.
Well, we know this, and you know this far better than most in your years of child development and your background in family communication and relations, that our formidable concepts of self are inherited, that our value systems are widely influenced by the environments that we were affiliated with in our formidable years, i.e., from your birth to when you're about 17 years old.
Right.
And so the perceptions that we're actually using to measure are kind of a sliding scale, because they're not ours entirely. They're ours in operation.
Mhm.
So if I were to put it a different way, your hard drive, which is your unconscious, has been programmed. 90% of which you did not put in there as an operating system.
Right.
And so when we're using this and going, okay, how do I feel? I don't know. Based on my current life situation, this is what I'm experiencing right now.
Mm.
Hmm, did I actively select to feel this way? Nope, not really. Don't even know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm having a reaction or a response to a trigger, or you know what? Frankly, I'm just not happy right now.
Right.
Okay, why? I don't know. And this becomes one of the universal questions for some folks when we start talking about anticipation, expectations. You know, there's this concept in business that if you manage a client's expectations, that you're being proactive and that you know exactly what they need in their life. And I was like, going, really? Do they know what they need in their life? Or is that just a perception as well?
Right.
Because if we really start following this Hansel and Gretel trail of crumbs down the rabbit hole, it can get pretty perverse pretty quick. And that is, do any of us really know what we need?
Well, I think you had a great point there, Chuck, is that anticipation. It's that whole gambling theory. Why do people get addicted to that machine or to gambling? It's not the jackpot that they win, it's the anticipation and the dopamine and all the oxy whatever's going on, right? That all those hormones that are dropping in that
Absolutely.
in that anticipation that this is going to happen now. And we do that in life. And I would even go to say that even when, if you have an expectation as a friend from me, and I feel I'm not fulfilling it, I'm doing everything I can, and in anticipation that I will do the right thing to hit the bingo. Right?
Sure.
Okay, Kate, Venu, now I'm okay with you. Now I like you again. And I think that's one of the things that kids run into every day. And that's why more and more kids are lonely, because they're trying to figure out, especially after COVID, they're trying to figure out, where do I fit in now? Where's my tribes now? It's There was no tribes during COVID. Like, it was every man for themselves. And it's not even the addiction to the electronics anymore. It's the addiction to the connection.
Well, it's a different form of electronics now. The
Absolutely.
the social media addiction has become so pervasive that people's opinions of self, like, I mean, unless you're Joe Rogan and you have the number one podcast in the world, anything that's even a close second is like, I mean, how much social exposure do you have? How often are you being judged or ridiculed, or people have opinions about you? It's kind of like, I was explaining this to my wife the other day, and Julie and I were discussing about text messaging, and people can misconstrue so much information on a text message. And I was like going, wait, you got this whole cockamamie story filled with kerfuffle and frustration and aggravation from this? Like, two-sentence text? Holy smokes, this wasn't War and Peace. This was literally a couple of words typed down and then sent.
Right.
Well, it's again the story that someone else has in their own mind's eye as to what the meaning of the language is, the types of words that are used. And I was like, what? Wow. Because here's the truth: most people communicate at a fifth grade level. And if you
Right.
start going way beyond that, people will start prognosticating or coming up with different meanings for words because they're going, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but the tonality of it. And I was like, the tone of it. Did you hear inflection in my voice? Did you hear Oh, no, it was in a text. I was like going, what? Did they put in more S's or more vowels or, I mean, consonants? How did they stretch this word out where you're giving it 15 meanings for the way it was used in this context, which was in a very general statement? Now, why do I go there? We have such a varied environment now from what you and I've grown up with as kids. When we were kids, if you had a beef with someone,
You solved it.
it was here.
Right.
It wasn't, "Oh, we're gonna be all over the place." Oh, it's like, "No, we're gonna be here, and we're gonna have communication, and we are gonna discuss this." It's like, "Okay, that feels better." But with the messaging that I'm seeing now, it's like, and if someone wrote you a letter and you're like going, "Hmm, I may have a few questions about what the meaning of all this is." Because at times, what can be said to someone, even in a word or in a few words, like "love ya," you gotta go, "Okay, great." Is that a playful love ya? Is that, "Oh, I love you." Oh, that seems a little bit more pronounced. "Love you, mean it." Kind of flippant. Why? Because the way that things are said and the intention and the energy that's shared, and I'm finding now that there are fewer people who know how to write with energetic intent.
Right.
Now they go, "Well, what does that have to do?" I said, "'Cause there's a freaking expectation."
Right. It's so funny when you're saying like how we communicated because I just remember when we were little in the years that we grew up, when I got in a fight with my best friend, I would either pass her a note saying, "Are we going to talk?" It was like a little note, and you had to pass it along in class, going, "Here, give this to Tiffany." Or if you didn't have a class with her, like walking by and running and putting it in her locker real quick and then getting to class. But again, it was, are we going to talk? It wasn't solving the problem in a handwritten note. It
No.
was, are we going to talk? Are we going to meet at the park? Or it's showing up at her house, knocking on her door, and her going, "Why are you here?" Um, like, I just thought we've been in a fight for a day, that we're good now. Okay, come on in. Let's go play Super Mario Brothers, right? Like, that is how we used to solve it. And now kids can hide behind text messaging. They
Oh,
can say things that are so cruel and think that it's not going to matter because they did it in a text message versus saying it in person. And I think that now, and the more that we do it too as parents and
mhm,
adults, we are role modeling that to our kids, that I'll just send them a text. Like, so when parents are arguing with their kids and they're in a text message arguing them, and I'm gonna say, I have adult kids and I can't, confirm nor deny if I had some of those text messages back and forth with my adult sons at times.
sure.
But finally I get to the point where you need to call me.
Oh,
It just gets down to that. Like, it goes back and forth, and all of a sudden it's like, you need to call me. because all of a sudden I remember I was like, you know what? If I want them to respect me, I have to model that. So you need to call me now. We need to resolve this because the tension that I feel in that moment with my children does not feel good. And you being one of my best friends, you know that because I'll call you and be like, oh gosh, here we go now.
Right, and there's a disconnect, right? And it's like, going, "Wait, we're communicating for connection. Then why are we purposely disconnecting?" Like, I love my children to the depth of my soul. Don't freaking text me from upstairs. Like, I'm, like, going, yell over the banister, walk downstairs. I'm like, "It's 25 steps." Really, people, like, this where this is what we've resolved to now? "Hey, hanging out." I was like, "Wait, are you kidding me? You're kidding me." I love this. What someone's writing, I like using it. It's too much to text. Call
Yes,
me.
I love that. Yeah, too
It
much to
is.
text. Call me.
It is. And part of it too is this. It's one of those scenarios where and Vinu, you and I'll say this. I've used this so many times. It's like it's not what you said, it's how you said it.
Yes, tone. That's our new word in our house. Tone,
Yep.
tone, tone. Because we are all, my husband, I, and the twins, all four of us, are practicing our tonality.
Mm.
And us adults,
Yep.
where if the kids feel that there is a tone that is taken out of context,
Yes.
and here's the rule though. We're going back to rules now. I'm the referee, by the way. The rule is that it has to be playful.
Yes.
Because here's the truth is that I have found over the last 2 years, what has shifted in my life is when I got playful.
Mhm.
You could turn anything, any conflict when you get playful. When kids are bored with their homework and they're not doing it and they're not turning in, how do you make it playful? How can you make it fun? Bring the fun back into it. But
Yes.
here's the deal. It goes back to this topic. Whose expectation are we trying to fulfill in that moment? Once again, for us to be enough.
It's a circular conversation. In fact, I'll even say it's a figure eight.
Oh,
Um, because fun can come across as cynical at times.
mm,
And people go, "Well, what's the difference?" I said, "Motive and intention."
hmm
So part of, I'll say, expectation can be predicated back to values. And it's like, "Oh, well, give me an example." Okay, gratitude, the value of gratitude.
mm,
When living in gratitude, I have found it personally difficult to be cynical. In fact, I have found that it is much easier to be present in appreciation and gratitude.
right.
So, why does figure eight conversations happen? I say, well, because life conditions happen.
Right.
And so when we're not getting what we need, we shift to gratitude. And I was like, oh, it changes the conversation. And people go, but then what shifts? I say, comfort. So you get to a place of comfort, and then we kind of, I'll say, at least myself, lose the awareness around presence.
Mm,
Not that you're not in gratitude, but you've exercised gratitude, and now there becomes an expectation that things should go back to some sense of normalcy. And I go, oh, so we're in this looping of conditional behavior to
mhm.
come back to feeling good.
Right. Because as soon as I meet your expectation, then we're good until we're not again. And then we go into that. And see, these are the recipes, though. These are the recipes that keep us in that figure eight conversation and never get us out until one person recognizes it and says, you know what? What's my own expectation? How do I want to create my own standard and meet that standard? And here's what I need you to do to support me in meeting my standard.
Beautiful.
But here's the problem. And I'm lucky that you're coming on my show this Thursday because we're going to really look at this in the parenting and child, more so in that realm. But just to give a little teaser, it's this is why a lot of kids fear their parents,
Sure.
because their parents have this expectation of them.
Mm.
You will be the captain of the cheerleader. You will be the star quarterback of the football team. You will be in charge of your class. And the kids are like, but I don't want to be. I don't even want to cheerlead. What I
Right.
don't even like football. And yet these kids are so stressed out. They're not speaking to their parents because they feel if they don't meet that expectation, they themselves will not be fulfilled. And it's teaching them that your parents are here to guide you. That's
Absolutely.
it. They're not here to tell you what your expectations are and what fulfillment looks like for you.
No, true. True. And Venu, I'm gonna beg your indulgence. My computer's saying low battery, so I'm gonna make sure that I'm actually charging. So I want you to continue on that for a moment
Yeah.
with this one thought. What makes it work and what makes it not work when you're in that particular frame of that expectation? And I'm gonna be back in 1 second, literally.
So, going back with what he's saying is that what makes it work and what makes it not work. Number one, it's the communication. We have got to have open, safe, and trusting space to communicate with our spouses, with our employees, with our boss, with our friends, and with our kids. When we have that open, safe, and trusting space, then at that point, you are opening up the dialogue to have effective communication where you could actually have the conversation of, hey, this is working for me and this is my why, and this isn't working for me and this is my why. And although I want you to be happy, like say it's your boss, I want you to be excited about my performance. The avenue I want to take is this way, and this is why I feel it's going to work, and I'm still going to get you that outcome. It's just not going to look the way that you want me to. And when you're able to have that open, safe, and trusting space to communicate like that, everything shifts. Now, all of a sudden, you're working on your own expectations of yourself and learning how to fulfill yourself versus trying to fulfill yourself on someone else's expectations of you.
That's brilliant. And what I loved the takeaway from that is what is the quality of questions that we're engaging in asking?
Love it.
When we're dealing with adults, there's this expectation, right? This anticipation, if you will, that they're going to be able to cultivate a very articulated and clear response.
Mm,
And I'm finding that our children, in many instances, are far more creative and succinct with how they're really feeling in the moment, where when we are present and really listening, we can then come up with amazing solutions collaboratively because it's not where some of the disconnect comes from as a parent is that when we make it about my expectation and not about our expectation, which is it blended with how they're really feeling in that moment.
right.
'Cause there's so much analysis paralysis now that exists where the child actually knows more about certain merits of different things than even the adult does because of exposure.
Right.
And it's like,
Absolutely.
hmm, interesting.
Well, I like what our listener said here is how can kids function outside of a continuous expectation if they are not given the opportunity to express what they want? So true, Eric, like spot on. That is so true. And how I want to know, like, I want to know what my kids' dreams are. Like, my son says, I'm going to play in the World Cup. If he thinks he is 10 years old, almost 11, if he is going to play in the World Cup, then by God, I'm going to do everything I can in my power as a parent to support him in doing that. But I'm also going to ask him, are you practicing? What are you doing to get to the World Cup? Because
Mhm.
I can't want it more than you do. My daughter wants to be on The Voice. And I'm going to tell you, Chuck, when she used to sing 3 years ago, I think my ears used to bleed. And so we got her voice lessons
Sure.
from someone who taught Sam Smith, and he's in England. And every week she's been doing it for 2, 3 years now. And her voice has become so beautiful
Mhm.
because she practices and she practices all the time. And at first I was telling her, okay, here we go, right? My expectations. I'm paying for this. You need to put everything into it. I'm like, you're not practicing, you're not practicing, you're not practicing. And that beautiful smile of hers was getting worse and worse and frowning and sad. And I'm like, I don't know why you're sad. I'm paying for the thing. Why aren't you practicing? And here's what her coach said to me. Her voice coach says, will you stop? She is a kid. She shows up.
Yep.
I teach her. And trust me, there's going to be a day where she doesn't ever stop singing. Chuck, we have reached that day, my friend. We have reached that day. Even during show times, I'm like, you got to go downstairs. You cannot take a shower because that's her time. And I said, and I have my show. But again, he had to set me straight. And this is where it sneaks in on us parents, right?
Mm.
It's like, well, I'm investing in it. You're not doing what I want you to do. You're not doing it the right way. The expectation, I as your mom. So now she doesn't feel fulfilled because she's not doing it my way as the mom.
Perspective is a brilliant filter,
Yeah.
and it provides humility, understanding, connection, collaboration. Um, it's interesting, out of the mouth of babes, or I'll say children's movies, what we can learn. And there is a beautiful movie called Ratatouille, and it's like anyone can cook, you know. Uh, I love the perspective, and there is a food critic named Ego in this movie, and he said, "Tell your chef to bring his best, and I will bring the perspective."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very interesting paradigm shift to watch, because he ends up having a flashback based on a peasant dish called ratatouille, which is the name of the movie, that turns the tide. And why? Because something that was such a simple dish was prepared with such care and love that it brought back childhood memories for this critic. And I go, at times, maybe the question that we get to ask our children or others is, in truth, how does this make you feel? How are
Mm-hmm.
you feeling right now? What does it mean right now? Are you happy? Are you enjoying yourself? Are you enjoying the journey? Are you enjoying your progress? I was reminded of this when Keely's 16 now. So when she was just turning 14, and we were trying out for all these club soccer teams, and she had been invited to 6 different clubs to start playing. And we were like really excited. Just bought 3 different pairs of cleats for different turf and tall grass and short grass and hard surface and indoor. I'm like, holy smokes, this is like, wow. I
A
had,
D store?
yeah, I was like, I had 1 pair of cleats growing up. I mean, like seriously, 1 pair a season, that was it. Not hey, which kind of, field are you playing on? And long story short, she says, Dad, I think I'm done playing soccer.
What?
I'm like, who are you? Like, who just took my little girl, my studly daughter, who is a center fullback and just dang, and she's like, I'm not having fun anymore.
Mm.
And I'm like, when did this happen? And this is what got my attention. She goes, about 6 months ago. And I'm like, but we've been trying all these teams, and you've been like
Getting all these different cleats. Like,
mentoring which one you want to go to, and mommy's been buying you new sports bras because things are changing, and daddy's confused. Daddy's really confused. Like,
right.
you're like done, and she goes, "Yep, done." I'm like, Okay. What would you like to engage in instead?" She goes, "Color guard." I'm like,
Oh,
is that the one with the wooden rifles and the flags and sabers and cute outfits and dancing? And she goes, exactly. And I was like, what does that have to do with kicking a soccer ball? She goes, nothing.
mm,
And it makes me happy.
mm.
And so a little part of me died that day, and
Yeah.
another part of me awoke that day. And it was like going, perspective.
Yeah.
Because we think our kids are enjoying something, and all of a sudden it was like, ruh-roh. I saw that going a whole different way. And I pared it down to one thing. I had my expectations and thought, listen carefully to this, I was feeding hers.
Right. Wow.
And it was like, nope. Um,
You're feeding
and
your own.
I, as near as I can figure, I was not being fully appreciative and present. I
Right.
was so caught up in the hype of the other dads, the moms, their team, how they were doing, her skill set. She's naturally gifted at it. She has two legs that are like cannons, can clear the ball from any distance, can take shots like from 50, 45, 50 yards out. And you're like, oh, this is insane that this kid has this talent. And she was miserable.
I had a client that had the same issue, and it's funny because Eric said the same thing that's happened to him. And the when I got the client and she was self-harming,
Mm,
her grades were dropping, and the parents are like, I would do anything. Like, what do we need to do? Like, you were highly recommended. Please get on a call with my daughter. Let's see where we go. I got on one call with her and I said, I'm like, what's up? And I hate soccer. I'm like, okay. Can you tell your parents that? Oh God, no. No, 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 no.
right.
You don't understand, Miss V. You don't understand. I said, well, I probably do. So go ahead. Tell me what you got. And she says, well, my parents just, they got a soccer mom sticker to their bumper. It's like their identity, from what she was telling me, is wrapped up in their daughter playing because she was so good.
Hmm.
And I said, so you hate soccer? She goes, I don't hate it. I lost the thrill of it.
Mm,
And I said, well, what would have to happen for you to get the thrill back, the fun? She goes, I can't this year. I need to take time off.
yes.
She goes, she says, I play for a club that it's all year round. There is no break.
Nope.
There's no break. There's not a soccer season. It's soccer season's all year round.
Soccer life.
Right.
Yes.
She says, and I just feel that I can't tell them. I will disappoint them. So she rather hurt herself
Mm,
and deal with it herself. So I get off the phone and I say, what can I tell your parents and what not? Because as you know, there's things that I will share with the parent if my client says it's okay, and there's things that I will not.
right.
And I said, can I open this conversation, this dialogue with your parents? She goes, you will. Like she felt like I was her safeguard because
Mm,
she didn't have to do it. Right. And when I talked to her parents a day or so later, she goes, I don't know what you said to my daughter. And the mom's crying. She goes, thank you. She goes, in over a year, last night was the first time that her and I just sat down and talked for an
mm.
hour. And she told me she didn't want to play soccer. And I'm not going to lie. I thought it was going to kill my husband to tell him that. Because it was daddy, by the way. Daddy
Okay,
was like the one that was all in it.
I
Watch
get it.
baby girl,
Yep.
with those legs. And it's like, she's like, you gave my daughter life again. But she says, you gave me the life with my daughter again.
Do you know why it was that way for daddy? This is what is gonna be very interesting. It was a common connection point that
Mm,
allowed them to express appreciation and gratitude to each other
wow.
in a way that it was a familiar language.
Mm,
And it's a very myopic, um, masculine trait
mhm,
that in that one upmanship is for many men, it's challenging to connect with their daughters. There's so much downmanship that occurs within feminine circles that it's one of the few ways that men find that they can actually connect at that level. It also happens when young ladies come to their dad to talk about boys
right,
because it's a field of familiarity. It's a field
right,
where it's like, huh, I know a little something about this, and I'm happy to protect my little girl. Um, to that point, when there's common ground, now the masculine male, the father, feels full and appreciated, and he's contributing. He's being a provider. He's being a nurturer. He is providing sensory acuity and security for his
right.
little girl. So when someone goes, "I don't wanna play this anymore," although it's not a direct affront to him, it's a, "Oh, wait, that was something that we shared, and you're not just allowed to take that away and flush it."
Right, because it's now personal. Now our bond severed. Now what are we gonna have together, right? Now what are we gonna do? Like,
Right. And who said the bond was severed? It's like they're
right,
you
perspective,
eh,
perspective. So, it goes back again, and this happens with friendships, this happens with employees when you feel you're not fulfilling, and this is like the real thing that this comes down to is ask yourself, for all our listeners out there, ask yourself, am I fulfilled in all the areas of my life, my career, my finances, my home life, my relationship, my parenting, my spiritual growth, my health journey, your career path, whatever it is, look at all your areas. And if you're not fulfilled, ask yourself, are you not fulfilled because of someone else's expectations or your own expectations? Because you might just find out you might be fulfilled if you start following your own expectations. Because that's what happened to me. When
Yep.
I went from not feeling enough in my life, and I
Mhm.
felt that a lot, and I contribute to no self-worth, no self-love, no self-esteem, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But all that came to because I was never going to have self-worth when I didn't think I was valued enough because I couldn't meet other people's expectations, you know? And then I felt like everything I said was taken wrong. And, one of my mentors said that what you say is not bad, it's your delivery that's not great. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, about that."
More
About that.
precisely, right? It's not what you said, it's how you said it,
It
and
is, and
and
it's
this goes
perception again, the
Mhm.
perception of how it's received.
And this goes for how we speak to ourselves as well.
Yes.
Because you brought up an amazing point, Vino, and this is so if you're listening tonight and you this is the only thing you take away from this. Your self-talk is your own expectation. And if you're not willing to love self and others around you are saying, "You know how beautiful you are. You know how brilliant you are. You know how bold you are. I'm so proud of you." And your self-talk is that, "What's so special?
Right.
I'm not sure. Why do people keep saying this?" Well, maybe, just maybe, it's because they see greatness in you. Maybe it's because you're extremely hard on yourself, and under the auspices of saying, "I keep really high standards," you're judging all the time.
I wanna say something about that, though, because I've lived in that, and I used to hide behind, "Well, I have high standards."
Mhm.
So what? Do the other people that are saying that have low standards?
E exactly.
Right? And do I really have high standards, or are my standards the standards I think you have on me that I'm not meeting?
And again, this is that figure 8, right? We could go down that rabbit hole real quick. What if we just said thank you?
What if?
And
What
what if
what
there's
if
a possibility that they're right?
right. And
Hmm,
what if we decided if you needed more information, just ask them where specifically, how specifically?
that's
Because if you could see someone else's perspective about you or someone else's opportunity to see your greatness in you and you can't find it yet, start asking. Start saying, "Thank you so much for that compliment. How specifically, where specifically do you see that?"
yep.
And allow them to share the knowledge they have about you within you so you too can start to see that.
It's so important. I remember a dear friend, and she said this to me once, and she goes, "I wish you could see what I see in you."
Yes.
And it's like, "What the frick are you talking about?" Like, "Okay, what is it that you see specifically?" And they continued to elaborate, and it's like, "Wait, you see all that?" And this is where I say, at times, perspective can be our champion, and it can also be like a fog bank.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
can't see what you can't see.
Well,
And yeah, please.
I used to say back in the day is that I wish I had your eyes.
Mm,
Because people would say things to me, and no matter what, I could not see it. I was not in a space to bring it on, not because I had high standards, although I did use that a lot. It's because that meant that you're putting another standard on me, and that's another one I cannot meet.
right.
So I would always just say, I wish I had their eyes. I wish I had their eyes to see the beauty in me. I wish I had their eyes to see why I'm so great. I wish I had their eyes to see why they think I'm so smart. And it was when I opened up my own eyes
Mhm.
and I realized what I needed to see, not through their eyes, but through my own. That's what shifted for me.
That grace and gratitude is such a huge gift. And in that appreciation of self, there are times when people will adopt an ideology of humility. And I was like, is it false modesty or is it actually owning self?
Mm,
See, there are those that deflect because it's easier.
yeah,
Because if they don't have to raise their standard to meet the expectation that other people and the greatness that the other people see in them, then they're never going to disappoint anyone because they always feel like they're just above the fray. They're just above, that tipping point where it's like, hey, man,
100%. That was it, Chuck. That was it. That was exactly it. You nailed it. And how many people in life go through this? And that's why I felt this conversation had to be said because, I look at the way the world is changing. I look at the opinions about what's going to happen to the stock market, what's going to happen to our currency, what's going to happen. Again, are we going to stop? Are we going to live in fear of what could happen because someone else has an opinion about it?
right.
Or are we going to start living our life now the way we need to in the moment, in the present, to be fulfilled?
We get to
Absolutely.
when we decide to. And that's really the tipping point to this entire conversation is when people get into a space of comfort, because that space that we were just talking about of being just beyond the fray, excuse me, is literally if you look at the sphere of comfort, of being okay, of being good, they're riding right at the top constantly. And so they go, ooh, but greatness, whew, that takes effort. That takes exceptional intention, focus, action. I'm comfortable where I'm at. And yes, and they're at that precipice where like going, ooh, I can kind of see over the edge. So it's kind of like a little risky, but there's so much security in staying in that safe spot that they don't adopt a higher identity. And here's
Right.
the reason why, the pain and pleasure principle, because they don't need to. And this is where when we start to see people do more to avoid pain than they'll do to give themselves pleasure. Well, if they're constantly being rewarded and they're getting the attaboys or attagirls or, "You know how brilliant you are, you know how amazing you are, I wish you could see the gifts I see in you." It's like, "Okay, great." So there's this exposure, there's media. It's like, "Oh, you changed my life. Oh, I had a breakthrough because of you." And we know environments like this, so people's egos are fed on a continual basis. There's only one challenge, though. Is it really substantive? Is it really valuable?
You just brought up such a great point, which I just had an aha moment. So thank you. In some of these environments, what I just realized is when we don't know their expectations, we don't feel fulfilled because we don't know how to fulfill it. And so we're constantly in this rat race,
Yes.
or the hamster on the wheel is a better probably analogy of constantly just being on that wheel thinking, okay, I'm going to get that expectation. I'm going to understand it. And you never get to understand that expectation. And so you never feel fulfilled.
Well, you get the concept of it, but you don't have to execute it. And that's the difference is that your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you comfortably can live with, and that also provides an opportunity, and that is to exercise. W Frankly, you need to eat your own cooking.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. Well, Chuck, once again, we've had a very fast conversation, it seems. And thank you all that for joining us, because this is really something important that we all need to be living now. We need to live this purpose now, is know your purpose, know how you fulfill yourself without other people's expectations. And that's what Chuck and I really wanted to have this conversation with you guys. So thank you for joining the conversation tonight. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.